Hey, how's it going, everyone? Ty from BreakerCulture, proud members of the Bench Clear Media team. Today, I have a great conversation for you. I sit down with Darren Herman, who is a venture capitalist, has been working for a couple prominent VC firms over the past 10 plus years, and really comes at the sports card market from a really unique perspective. Got back into the hobby, was a collector growing up, got back into the hobby about a year ago. We listened to that story. You can read more about that in some of his articles. But we just break down really what his perspective is on the hobby, both from a venture capitalist perspective, where's the money going, where's the opportunity, and from a collector's perspective, what has him concerned, where would he be focusing his attention? And I think it's very fascinating. Again, we hear all these different angles, right, about how the market's growing. You got investors over here, you got hobbyists here, you got little segments here that are growing and popping, and you're starting to see a lot of these pull back. It's important to learn from other instances of asset markets and figure out what we believe can happen in the sports car world. And so we talk a lot about that. It's very much economic focus. It's very much marketplace focus. And if you're interested in kind of getting a different perspective on where the market could go, you'll want to listen to this. I found Darren because I was looking through Twitter, saw a couple articles pop up. He wrote one about the $1 billion market cap, and he gave a market cap roadmap that you can look at that shows kind of his perspective of different buckets in the hobby. And then he talked about just the sports car marketplace being at an all-time high and what that means, and really for folks that are just getting into it, what the response should be. So anyway, enjoy this conversation with Darren. Again, gets pretty technical, but I think again, if you're putting your money into the hobby, you should get every possible angle to make sure you're making an educated decision. Okay. Now, real quick before we jump into this, two things. Two great sponsors for this podcast. One, we've been mentioning them for weeks, ExpressVPN. I cannot iterate enough how important it is to protect yourself this day and age with the things that you're doing, both in and out of the hobby, right? You're logging into your banking site, you're logging into eBay, PayPal, you name it, Square. You need to protect yourself. And one of the easiest ways, the most convenient ways of doing that is by using a VPN. A VPN simply scrambles and protects the data that's being transferred over your connection. And so you can click the link in the show notes and you'll see ExpressVPN. You'll get a month free for signing up using our link. And look, you can try it out, see if you like it. But it's really simple, guys. I log in the morning when I'm browsing and doing stuff that's important. I click connect, and it connects me to the nearest hotspot for a VPN connection, and it scrambles things, and I know that I'm doing things protected. Super, super simple. The second sponsor, and our newest sponsor, and we're super stoked about this, is Pastime Marketplace. If you're buying graded, if you're holding graded, and if you want to store graded, you need to protect your assets. And Pastime Marketplace puts together incredibly good card cases. They put together graded card cases that protect your assets. And we talked about them during the Hobby Palooza. Mike has talked about them on his show. Jeff has some protecting his cards. And look, Bill over there is just a great guy and working really hard to put together stuff that the hobby wants. And he's always innovating and trying to come up with things that he thinks make sense for hobbyists when they're collecting and storing their graded cards. So go check them out. Pastime Marketplace. Use code BenchClear for 10% off your first order, and go try one of those cases to protect your PSA or BGS graded cards. I can guarantee that you will not be disappointed. All right, on to the conversation with Darren. Enjoy. Darren, how you doing, man?
Happy to be here. How can you be bad these days?
That's right. It's a Thursday night. Sports are on, playoffs are on, and we're talking about sports cards. I mean, my gosh, does life get any better?
It's minus that health thing that we got going on. Life's pretty good. So,
oh man. Well, thank you for joining, man. I appreciate it. I know the evenings with both of us have kids sometimes can be a little tough, but I appreciate you making some time.
Hey, if they walk in or we hear them, all the power to it. But
isn't it funny? It's the new norm, right? Like you almost expect it. If it doesn't happen, you're like, wait, what's this guy doing with his family?
Well, So it like right here is like the printer in this cabinet. And I'm on like business calls all day with video. And, you know, when the kids are doing school from home and they got to print things, they don't even like knock on the door. They just come right in. And it's like, hello. And I'm like, oh, say hi to, you know.
Yeah, exactly.
And
hey, boss.
It is what it is. Exactly.
Were you a Zoom user before COVID? I feel like there's a massive group of people that had no idea what Zoom was before COVID.
So I, fortunately, or, whatever, I worked in tech I worked at a big tech company for a while.
No.
And we were global and there were no telephones and everything was a video chat. And when I went there in 2016, like I was so used to the telephone, but now everything was like video. And it took me like 3 months to like get used to it. But then when I got used to it, it was like, holy cow, I would not go back. Like, this is the perfect, you get to engage with someone. Yeah. And then when I went to finance and investing, we went back to telephones. But about a year and a half ago, we brought in sort of Zoom as sort of our daily, routine just by chance. And so now this is like second nature. But I think it's great, but I definitely get Zoom fatigue by the end of the day. But because we're talking about sports cards, I won't get Zoom fatigue.
Well, just one final thought on that. The company I worked with was a combination of GoToMeeting and Microsoft Teams. We had groups using Skype, and it's funny how so quickly different organizations consolidated on one platform, mostly Zoom. It's like, get rid of all this crap. Now we actually have to use something that works.
Yes.
Good for Zoom. That's the reason why their stock market's exploded. But anyway, well, man, I came across your article, I want to say about a month ago. It was the one you wrote on, it's on September 3rd. You wrote one before that too, and I saw the title and it was Sports Card Markets at an All-Time High. Let me explain what I've learned through digital innovation. And I saw that, and that obviously stuck out to me just with my background.
Yep.
It's a fascinating article, but
thank you.
You have a unique perspective. So I want to give you kind of the floor to tell us a little bit about who you are, your origin, both in terms of your background with tech, but also just your background in sports cards. And then we have a lot to talk about tonight. So
yeah. So it all started as a kid, growing up in Westchester County, New York, which for those unfamiliar, it's about, it's a county about anywhere between 13 and 30 miles north of Manhattan. So, you're right outside of New York City. And I was the first American born of my family. And so my family's from South Africa, and sports for them are a lot different than back in, the 50s and 60s is a lot different than sports for most Americans. And so my brother's 3 years younger, also in tech, he and I kind of fumbled our way learning American sport as kids. And, we played them, but our parents weren't super helpful to us because they didn't exactly know how to throw a baseball or a football or whatever. And, just like most kids, growing up in the early 80s, there were packs of cards, and I didn't want the pack of cards. I wanted the stick of gum. And so I would buy the pack of cards just to get the super stale stick of gum for whatever reason. And then, oh yeah, by the way, I've got, 10 or 12 cards, coming along for the journey. Yeah. And in Westchester County, we had this convention center called the Westchester County Center. Not exactly the best name, but it is what it is. It's where actually the New York Knicks G League team plays today. So we would go there, once a month. There was this big card show. My brother and I would go with $3 in our pocket because that's all we had back at the time. And we probably got ripped off by every seller possible, but we had the best time in the world. And, we'd try buy packs, we'd try buy cards. Growing up, my mother, and even to this day, is probably the most neat and meticulous mother there possibly is. And I have to credit her, and I hope one day she listens to this, on how she made us clean up and take care of our cards. And she knew nothing about cards, but she knew that at the end of the day, those cards need to go away because she doesn't want to see them. And so she got us like the cardboard boxes and the binders with the plastic sleeves and just she didn't know anything about them, but she just didn't want them out in the house. And so they went away. And so, there's actually one of the little guys. And so So we put them away. And, to this day, when they sent me, my boxes of cards, they're in good condition. So, thank you, Mom. So, that was my early life. As a kid, probably the highlight of collecting as a kid. I was opening up. My rule was, get a good mark on a test, and my late grandmother would take me to Big Top Toys, and I'd be able to pick out any toy, and within reason. One year I didn't get many good grades, but when I did, went there and I got a pack of cards, and I was opening a classic cards pack. Yeah. I pulled, it was Shaquille O'Neal's rookie years, 1992. And I pulled my first pack pulled autograph. And I thought that was the coolest thing. Like, I read about, I subscribed to Beckett back then. I subscribed to a bunch of stuff. And I read about all these people pulling autograph cards. And this was a signed 1 of 500, I think it was. Hand signed on the card, and congratulations, you got a Shaquille O'Neal signed rookie card, and that got me hooked. I was like, wow, Shaquille O'Neal held this card, and now I have it, and here's a signature. And at the time, it was worth much more than most of my other cards, and says Beckett, and so I was over the moon. And then life happened, and I got gray hair. I went away for the hobby for about 30 years. A long time. And for those that are not watching, I don't know, my son just walked in the background. And if you saw him, he's been going to sleepaway camp. He goes to sleepaway camp along with my daughter, at least for the last 6 years. And every visiting day, he asks us to bring something. And so for the last 5 years or so, give or take, he's been asking for sports cards. And my wife has gone out and bought the sports cards, 5 years ago. And so we've been, bringing them up on visiting day. And then about, 18 months ago, 2 years ago, 2 summers ago, on visiting day, I was like, David, what do you have? And he's showing me 2012 Kawhi Leonard. He's showing me a 2012, LeBron. And I'm like, all right, buddy, your edges look terrible, so I got a lot to teach you. But you're doing the right things, and so that's kind of where I got the itch. And then I have a lot of friends that collect cards, and some are fairly well-known guys in the industry. And we go out to dinner and we talk about life, but some of the conversation ends up around cards. And at the end of those meals, I look to my wife and I'm like, I should just go buy some, we talked about these 6 cards. Let me just go buy these 6 cards. For the last 4 years, I didn't do it at all. 0. But it's one of those things that I can look back and I was like, he was talking about this. I should have probably went and bought that until last November. And so we were out, we were talking, and I've been fortunate enough on the business side that, every year we make a bunch of angel investments. And I just told my wife, I'm going to take some money that I've reserved for some tech angel investments, and I'm just going to buy some cards. And she looked at me like I, 7 heads. And I was like, just trust me. And so last November, I said, I'm going to take $1,000 and I'm going to buy as much LeBron James as I possibly could buy. And the strategy there was, buy the most modern, best card you can. Yeah. And so, about 15 minutes of research led me down to ETOPS. And then it led me down to, all right, make sure it's PSA 10 graded. And so I was back in November, they were going anywhere between $90 and $110. And I put $1,000 into it. And I put those away. I got them, bought them off eBay, and I put them away. Hold on one second. Not a good time to be doing that.
Can I just take some more cases?
Take some cases. Goodbye. And so
right on cue, man. He's right on cue.
He's casing his cards and begging them into the case.
Get him on the show for the love. My gosh.
Just take the cases and don't come in for another hour. Thank you. And so So just reversing back. So bought 10 cards last November. All LeBron James E-tops, put about $1,000 into that. Amazingly bought the cards for $90 to $110. Put them away. Then was on a ski trip in January with my family. And it was like one of those rainy days on a ski trip is where you kind of like don't go skiing and you're kind of like lazy and just moving around the house. And I was like, let me just buy some more cards. And so I went on eBay and I was like, I did those 10 LeBrons. It's time to do 10 Lukas, because Luka's playing out of his mind. He's a rookie. Kristaps used to be on the Knicks. I think that the Mavs will probably be good. I'm spending a lot of time in Dallas for work. There's just a lot of things that could, are going right there. And so I did the same thing, and I bought a bunch of Prism and Prism Silvers of Luka, and like PSA 10s, and put those 10 away. $1,000 in Luka, and put those 10 away. Then completely, left it. Fast forward to March or April recently, my wife looked at me. She's like, "Remember those cards you bought? They're like sitting around your office. What are those things doing?" And I was like, "I don't know. I put them away. Like I'm collecting for the long term." And I got friends like Gary and Nat, and they're chirping about cards, and Nat's Instagram's going crazy, and Gary's talking about everything about cards, and Darren Ravel's like a lot of friends all chirping about cards, and I'm like, all right, let me just check the prices of these things. And I looked at the market value of those E-tops LeBrons. I was like, my eyes almost fell out, and I'm a professional investor, and I was like, whoa, the IRR, the rate of return on these cards versus the price, this is legit. And so, I sold a handful of them to return the principal that I took from my wife, and then it's been game on ever since. I'm coming at it from I'll stop my monologue in a second, but I'm coming at it from two angles. One of which is, as someone who was in the hobby, as a kid, this kind of reignited the fire and the passion that I have in it. And not on the financial side, because I don't think I ever was able to sell a card as a kid. Mm-hmm. I think it was when my friends came over to the house, it was something to do. And when it was raining outside and I was flipping through my card collection, it was just a source of pride and happiness. And, every card I could tell you where I got it. Like I knew that I got it at this trade show, or I got it like from this person, and there's always a story behind it. And it was just something so romantic about that. And so that's like the majority of like my excitement of the card space. Then I was like, wow, you can actually make a couple of bucks. And, for some people really make, quite a bit with, the right, investments. And, I've primarily been pretty bread and butter with my, personal investments, like American Pie, hot dog, and stock market, like ETFs, bonds, munis. But I've been, open to alternative investments as well. And we have a whole bunch, my wife and I, for the family. And so, for me to understand that sports cards or collectibles in general can be an alternative investment opportunity. Yeah. And, I proved at least at a little bit to myself. And so, I've taken a portion of our, wealth and put some into, the space. And at the same time, for work, it's where can we invest? And, as my job, I study markets to understand, where are there opportunities to invest? And then once you find a market to invest in, what are the, where are the sectors within that market that get really interesting? And so, this hobby and, personal affection has led me into really thinking about this space from, a professional investor perspective, and not just thinking about it, okay, which card do I want to buy, or, what make, do I prefer Topps or Panini or Upper Deck or whatever. But, I think we can talk a lot about, the sectors within this market that are ripe for innovation, and tech platforms and community platforms and in areas that we can make this hobby grow a lot more. So long-winded answer to your story, but that's the setup. And
I love it. No,
I'm excited to be here, man.
Well, thank you. No, that's good. For those that have not read your article on September 3rd, you unpack that even more just about your background. I think it's pretty fascinating. But so 2 questions that come to mind immediately. First off, do you still have the Shaquille O'Neal that your mom preserved? Do you have the autographed Shaq?
No. So my brother, now it's gonna be like my brother's gonna like watch this and scream at me. So I was visiting my brother's house, and his beautiful family. He's got 2 little, like, my nieces and whatever. And I was visiting his house, and I look on he's got like a home office. He's an entrepreneur, and I look at his walls, and I'm like, where did that Cal Ripken come from? Where did that Michael Jordan autograph come from? Where did that, Ken Griffey Jr. autograph come? He had these like 8x10s that were in my room growing up. And he's like, oh, I went to mom's house. She wanted me to get rid of this, like, all this autograph stuff. And he's like, I just took it. And so I figure, I'll take the 8x10 autographs and you can keep the baseball cards. And he sports card. And I was like, okay. And I was like, fine. And so I took the boxes of cards. My mom mailed up a lot of them, but I took them, and I knew damn well that there was that Shaquille O'Neal signed card.
Yeah.
And the first is I had that in a 1985 Mario Lemieux, and I took both of them, and they had been in these like thick plastic cases with the 4 screws. Like, these are like, they didn't even have magnetic cases back then. Like, right. Like the hardcore, like, these cards have been in those thick cases since 1992. I don't know, 1985 for the Mario Lemieux and 1992 for the Shaquille O'Neal. Like, they haven't come out of them, and the cases were scratched, but the cards were unbelievably in perfect condition. Wow. And so I put them on eBay, and I put them on eBay and I sold them. And they did well, considering my cost basis was like nil. But then my brother calls up like 2 weeks after that fact, and he's like, remember that Mario Lemieux? Can I get that one back? I'll send you the Michael Jordan autograph that I have on the wall if you can send me that Mario Lemieux card. I was like, I just mailed that to like Alberta. Someone from Alberta bought the card. He's like, what do you mean someone just bought that card? That was my card. I'm like, no. Those autograph 8x10s are now yours. Those cards are now mine. And actually, it's not mine anymore. It's some dude in Alberta. And so I sold them. But I actually kind of wish I didn't, because they meant so much way back when. Yeah. But it was more of the fact that, can I actually sell a card? And right. So like, that's what the last like 6 or 7 months have been, which is like dog fooding, like using a tech term that you probably like, in your world, I'm trying to like learn and dog food at the exact same time. Yeah. And so like, not just like be an investor who like studies the industry, like I want to be in it. Like, I have stuff at consigners, on eBay, on marketplaces, in tokenization for like companies. Like, I want to try everything to understand what's working and what's not, and do it all. And so the Shaq and the Mario were eBay sales. So hopefully someone doesn't return them, but I won't be upset if they do.
Well, the good thing is they're not playing, right? So they can't have a bad performance, and someone can't return or wouldn't return.
Shaq's on TNT or whatever it is, between the games, and who knows? He may put his foot in his mouth or something.
There you go. That's right. Yeah. He'll say something politically.
But I'm a fan, so whatever Shaq Diesel does is probably good with me.
That's right. That's funny. So the other question was around your son. It was perfect timing when he walked in. So one of the dilemmas we always find when we have guests on, we're talking about things, is just the conundrum we're in with the new modern day collecting, and then comparing it to really the nostalgia that we had, yeah, and how important it was to us. You mentioned the connections you had with each card. How do you feel like you're doing as a dad, and really the hobby as a whole is doing, as kind of just ushering in a new group of collectors? Like, is your son so focused on the return, or does he really enjoy collecting cards?
So he's starting to get to the age, so he's 12 right now. Yeah. And he's starting to get to the age where he understands, or starting to understand, entrepreneurship.
Yeah.
But he really appreciates the hobby. And what and why I say that is, I'd say that cards probably more so than almost, video games, computer games, and outside basketball, and then skiing are probably like the four things that, bring, my son and I together in many ways. And now cards have really come up that list. Yeah. And, he's been extremely open to learning the art and the science of cards. Now, and the way I sent him a bunch of stuff to camp, over the years, and, every edge of every one of those cards are gone, and, whatever, they decided to autograph some of the cards, and, it is what it is. But so when we got serious about it, and I took him to a card store, we have like two card stores roughly equidistant from our home. And I took him to one, I don't know, in April, and we bought a box, and we came home, and, I used a bunch of hyperbole, and, we put on rubber gloves, from like what we used to barbecue with, and, we put on our fresh rubber gloves, put down 8x10 pieces of paper, on the table. We basically sterilized like the area. And I literally sat there and showed him how to like rip open a pack, fresh wax. And, I showed him how to do it without touching the corners, and how to pull a card out and then place it down. And then I like certified him on how to, like, I watched him open packs. And, the goal was to teach him, you got to take care of the cards, because you really never know what you're going to pull. You never know if it could be a rookie card or an RPA or, whatever happens to be. And, you got to take care of it. And then we learned how to put them into like penny sleeves and then the plastic top loaders. And, we did all that stuff. And that's been a lot of fun. And, because of COVID, one of the biggest blessings of this, and I don't wish it upon anyone, but because of it, I've been home and not traveling. I haven't put my kids to bed for more than 10 nights in a row my entire life, and now I've been home for 6 months, and I get to sit with him at night, and he pulls out a stack of cards that I've probably seen 60 times already, but he pulls out a stack, and he's so excited to go through them. And most of them are cards that I've gotten that are bases, or something that I'm like, oh, take this Russell Westbrook. But to him, a Russell Westbrook's a Russell Westbrook. But it is what it is. But we go through them, and then I'd say what's really been interesting for him has been the Panini app. And so Panini has an app in the App Store that allows you to collect cards, and he is like a photographic memory. And he learned so quickly, and like he'll be able to tell you, oh, that's like a red back card, and a red back card is like a limited edition of this, or like he learned all about like the Origin series, or like the Court Kings, and like I can't even tell you half the stuff he knows, and he studies that app religiously. And I just find it, amazing that he's being exposed this way. And we do a once monthly video chat for card collectors. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that we allow is, you bring your kids, and we do show and tell for the first 20 minutes. And usually like, the mom or the dad will like show some ridiculously cool card, and then the kid will bring like, their card in and talk about it. And you have to talk about it for a minute or two, why it's special to you. And, I think kids getting involved in the hobby is so, so amazing. And, it's how I got in. It's probably how you got in. And, I think us as, the people who appreciate the hobby, have, a certain duty to, like mentor and grow, the next generation into it, so that they can then do it to their generations. And so that's what I'm super excited about. And,
for
hopefully
sure,
one day I'll bring them to the National.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. Yeah. That the National is a whole nother level, no doubt. It's funny as you're talking about your setup for your son and training. I'm thinking of like the ET scene, where they walk in, it's like a test tube into the house. Yeah. Everyone's in suits, and here you are with your penny sleeves, and
yeah, we did it.
All in.
You got to teach him. And now, he does it. And, all the power to them.
That's right. That's right. All right. So let's dig into some of the really fun stuff that I'm really excited to talk about. Let's start with a big question here. So what in the hobby has you most excited right now?
So when you say what in the hobby has me most excited, am I coming at that as a collector? Am I coming at that as an investor?
Let's come with that as an investor. I think it'd be fascinating.
So there's a fancy and famous chart that a really amazing original tech analyst turned investor used to show all the time in the digital media world. Her name is Mary Meeker, and she's been, a super famous analyst, and she shows this chart of for digital media and advertising, time spent in a medium and advertising dollars supported by whatever channel that is. So there's TV, there's print, there's radio, there's billboards, etc. So it shows like the time spent with each of those mediums. So like how much time we as Americans or global spend with television and the amount of advertising dollars that support the medium. And so why advertising dollars is because for most of TV is subsidized by advertising dollars. So what you see is you have all of these legacy channels, all these old school media channels, and the advertising dollars are virtually in balance with the time spent within the channels. Okay. Then you have digital. And what Mary was trying to impress on all of us in the industry was we've got tons of time spent in digital, but the advertising dollars are down here. And so the opportunity to innovate and invest is the delta between the current advertising dollars and the amount of time spent. So everything in the middle. And so if you take that framework, which clearly I didn't create, Mary, innovated it, and we have a lot of respect for her. You take that framework and then you look at the sports card space. It is almost exactly the same. And so, I was in the video game industry in the early 2000s, and as an entrepreneur. And when I was in the space, it was like taboo to say you were innovating in video games. Like, you'd be at a cocktail party and people are like, oh, I work on Wall Street, or I work in finance, and I go, I do this. And people are like, and then they're like, what do you do? I was like, oh, I build video games. And they're like, what? They're like, my kids play video games. And I was like, yep. Okay. and little did they know. And then I'd say, if they wanted a statistic to wow them, I would say, did you know the video game industry is bigger than Hollywood and the music industry put together? So you take two, and then you get this video game world. So I'm sure it's not just your kids playing video games. And so then I look at the sports card space, and there's a lot of similarities. It's like, oh, I collect sports cards. Oh, my kids collect sports cards. And it's kind of in the space of like, oh, you must be an outcast if you walk around with a bunch of cardboard, drooling over these things. And so I love that. And the reason why you like that as an investor is because it's a pocket where not a lot of people are looking. And so, when there's pocket where everyone is looking, that means prices are going up. So if you look at the stock, the super sexy tech companies today, their stock prices are going up because everyone's looking over there. And then you've got this in the corner, you've got like the sports card market and a lot of other stuff, but you've got the sports card market, and there's a ton of interest, a ton of time, a ton of people. And oh, by the way, a market cap of the space that most folks are predicting somewhere in that $4 to $8 billion range or larger. So it's not like, oh, it's like a $10 industry. It's already in multi-billion dollars of transactions and commercialization. But there's no innovation. There's no funded innovation in the space. And so all of the innovation, I want to say, 97% of all innovation in the space comes from necessity. And it's like, oh, the best innovation are these group breaks on YouTube or on Instagram after 9 o'clock at night. And, I want to go do that group break with pole wax And I love those guys, but like, it's a fucking pain in the ass to like, you go in, and it's not their fault. It's Instagram. Like, you go into Instagram, you're going into their live stream. It's like, I want to sign up. And I got to leave. I got to go to Venmo or PayPal. I got to do friends and family because gosh forbid I do goods and services, but I should never want to do friends and family publicly. Then I got to send it over there. And then they got to like find the transaction. Then they got to green light me. Then they got to put me into the break. And then, then they got to go to random.org or whatever, random.com. They got to randomize my whole thing. And then, by the time we're done using 7 different apps, and I guarantee one of them is going to crash at some point during that process, then we do the break. But as a Knicks fan, and I'm wearing like a Knicks fan shirt, if I don't have the Knicks and someone pulls an RJ Barrett, I want to offer that guy or lady some money to go get, that RJ Barrett he just pulled or she just pulled. But I can't do that, because the chat feed is like going up and down, and there's no way to like direct message that person without leaving the break. And if I leave the break, then there's like this whole delay. And so it's like wonky. And so that's just using group breaks as an example, but there's like a million other areas that we can talk about. And so what I get excited about as an investor is, what if I like made that 50% better? I bet with a little bit of real money coming into the space, whether it's me or somebody else, with a little bit of innovation and a little bit of money, we can create like legitimate technology platforms that'll allow anybody in the space to have a better experience. And if we can create a better user experience for the seller or the buyer or someone in between, then we all win. And so, rather than like MacGyvering and jerry-rigging Instagram to do a break, or like, trying to figure out how to do a break on YouTube and the scrolling like chat, like there are a lot better ways to do that. Or like, like cataloging your card, stuff. Like there's just so much opportunity. And so, going back to that Mary Meeker example, there's a ton of interest, very little like financing of innovation. If we can finance some innovation in the space, I think it gets really, really interesting for everybody. And so that's what gets me excited.
That's fascinating. So when you say money into the space, obviously that's your world. Are you starting to see money start to flow in, or at least be interested in figuring out how to flow in the right way in the lobby? Is it hard to convince people? I guess it's a better question.
Well, so there's some public money in the space. There's some public companies like Collector's Card and, which owns PSA, most of us, so there's some money in that space, and clearly people are excited about it because that's trading at a ridiculous multiple right now. There's some private money coming into the space, quite a bit. There's 2 types of private money coming into the space. And when I say private, it's into private companies or into private collections. So there's a handful of areas that I'm seeing sort of money flow into. The first area, which is probably easiest for most listeners to understand, is literally just buying cards. It's, throwing money into, I don't know, graded cards or ungraded cards. And there's, quite a bit of money coming into that respective space. And we can talk about where that's coming from. Yeah. The second, area of money coming into the space is funding some of the innovation. So, even just this week, I think Alt, one of the fractional ownership platforms, just came out with Axios saying they raised a bunch of money. Collectible recently, who you recently had on as well, Ezra, they raised a bunch of money. There's Rally Road, Otis, they're raising, they've raised quite a bit. So like the fractional ownership space of cards, there's a lot of money sort of flowing into that world from investors. And then there's money flowing into other pockets of sort of, the market map I laid out. And then the really interesting, and I'm not saying good, but really it's not bad. But the other interesting thing is sort of on the hush hush, there are literally like memorabilia and card funds being created. And so like groups of investors coming together, putting like $50 million to just buy LeBron cards, or $50 million to buy sealed wax, or like, so on and so forth. And there's the pros and the cons to that. But, if you look at I think like PwC Marketplace puts out an index, and the index that they show, which, take it with a grain of salt, is how they've, outperformed, the card wax market has outperformed, most major stock indices, which is, an amazing statistic when you think about it. And so why wouldn't you go do that? But that means you have to, basically invest in every single hit, which is almost impossible. But, it is what it is. So, there is money coming into the space quite a bit. But most of the money right now is flowing into just buying and selling cards. What I want to see is money coming in to support the infrastructure of end-to-end of buying and selling cards. And that's where I, as usually a B2B investor or B2B2C investor, that's where I get excited about.
Yeah, that's good. That's great perspective. Yeah, and coming from my background, right, it's all about data and analytics, and we kind of touched on this before we started the recording, just how when you look at building platforms right now in the sports car world, one of the massive missing components, the big holes, is there's just no standardized data. And even if you look at these platforms that exist right now, some of them are great, right? There's some great tools out there, but there's massive gaps because there's no standardization across the board. It's nearly impossible to get clean, good data.
Absolutely. It's almost like, who's going to become the Michael Bloomberg of, the sports card market. The fun thing about the industry is, we don't have clean data. That's what makes things, I used to be afraid of volatile markets. For folks, if I'm using too much finance speak, it's
already turned it off. You used it too much.
I used to be afraid of markets that were super choppy. Like if you're in a sailboat, seas that have huge waves. But it's in those markets that a ton of money is made. And understanding where to invest in those markets is super important. And so you don't need perfect data, you just need directional data. And you need to have the data and then use your gut on a lot of that as well. And, there's a lot of science to, where and how to invest, but at the same time, there's still feel and touch and heart. And, I personally like to invest in my cards where, the data tells me, these 3 players, and then I'll watch a game or two. And then, then I will make the decision, Montrezl Harrell has a lot of heart. You could tell early in the season he was going to be 6 man. He has a ton of heart. And, the data didn't always show that throughout the season, but he did. And, you got to watch it and you got to be a fan. And I think, you can be a financial investor and make some money. But I think that you can be a financial investor as well as a fan and do even better. And so, that's the opportunity, is, to marry sort of the art and the science, or the love, the passion, and, the business, bring it together, and then, do some interesting things within the hobby.
Yeah, that's good. So I talked about this. You mentioned Ezra earlier. We're talking about the similarities between the sports card market and other markets. And there's not a lot to point to. We talked about fine art, high-end art. Yep. Sneakers has come up.
Yep.
In your experience, what does this remind you of? Does anything come to mind in terms of what it looks similar to?
So we've been around a lot longer than the sneaker market, like the sports card market. And as someone who loves sneakers myself, there are similarities. I think art is interesting. I'd say the other one is wine. It's really the alternative assets. Automotive, and a reason for that is because these alternative assets, wine, art, cars, memorabilia, they in themselves don't perform. What I mean by that is, you can go look at like, a Stingray or a Ferrari GTO, or, name a car that's collectible. And they themselves aren't going to put, points on the board. There's, the rarity of the card that plays into it. It's the ownership of the card that plays into it. There's the historical performance, but where it performed is important. But there's a lot of subjectivity to, the automotive market. There's a lot of the art market is even more screwed up. It's, yes, there's the famous, the 18 famous, like, no nonsense artists out there, like, Salvador Dali or Van Gogh, and every artist that everybody can name. Yeah. Then there's everybody else, and why is one artist we've all never heard of trading at like 18 times some historical artist that is in textbooks? It's like there's so much manipulation in the art market. Now, I'm an art collector. My house is a ton of art, but it's such a screwed up market. What I find is interesting about the sports card market is that, and I haven't studied it fully, and I would love to see somebody do it, and I'm trying to think about how to do it, which is the causations or correlations between athletic performance and card value. And I think it has to go beyond just athletic performance on the court. I think it has to go with, how big or strong is the athletic brand of the player, the on and off the court. So, for example, like everyone in the United States knows who Chris Paul is because, he does a ton of commercials. But I bet because he does a lot of those insurance commercials, his cards have some value increase because of that, because of his, brand awareness and the affinity people have to Chris Paul. Then you take someone like LeBron, one of, if not the, top 5, if not the number 1 all-time player, and his cards have shot up in value. But then you take, the historical players, I love, like a Kareem Abdul-Jabbar or Lou Alcindor, and you look at their values, and some of their values of their cards are lower than some of the current existing players today. And so what I find interesting, and I don't know how to rationalize it fully yet, is there's the hype cycle of cards. There's a hype cycle in any industry. In our tech industry, there's the Gartner hype cycle. It's a curve. And, cards follow a curve. I don't know if it's the same as the tech curve, but there's the player's hot, comes into league super hot, everyone jumps on it, like Jeremy Lin back, way back, jumped on him, shot down, like went all the way down, like bottom, and then came back up and rode that and then kind of disappeared. And so I think, from an investor perspective in the sports card space, looking at the data, we kind of follow that hype curve. But the question is who sustains post that hype curve? And I don't know who. And, it is similar to other industries, but it's, a good guess along, everybody else. The one thing that I can probably impress upon there is, investments, in physical goods or physical assets, like real estate or other things, you always want to try and buy the best, because no one ever loses their money for buying the best in real estate, and, best location. And so, the philosophy I had when getting into cards was, who are the top 2 players that, are no brainers right now? And, you can't go wrong. And, that was LeBron and Luka. And so, as long as you stay, down the fairway with a good portion of your collection, and then have fun, branching out, on the outskirts. And you can actually do it even intra-player. You can build a super interesting, collection or asset class or however you want to think about it. But to your point around data, we need it. As a card collector, someone who has, if you have over 100 cards, how do you manage, what your cards are worth? It's near impossible. And there's some awesome platforms out there, Card Ladder and, Market Movers and hopefully when Slapstocks launches, and there's other stuff out there that's interesting. But the problem with a lot of those, and it's not a ding, that I use them, I pay them. The ding though is also they only have 10,000 cards in their database, or plus or minus. And yes, they're adding additional ones into it. But I'm a fan of art. We talked about art, and I like the Panini Status series. I think it's super cool. There's a lot of color. There's a lot of cool stuff on a Panini Status card. But the majority of those databases don't even look at Panini Status cards. Yep. And even if it's a Trae Young rookie card, Panini Status, they don't do it. And so for me is that offer. As an investor, I smell opportunity there. Which is, how do you, and I'm probably, I'm not an outlier. There's probably a lot of people like me that, invest, horizontally, not just vertically. And so, how do we broaden a lot of that stuff? And frankly, I had to build my own things to get me there. And other people have too. But there's clearly a market opportunity on, inventory management for collectors or speculators. And there's some folks building some stuff, but there's quite a bit of opportunity out there.
Interesting. So many things I want to dive into. And I'm thinking, okay, what do people want to hear most? Because I want to hear about all this stuff. But as you're talking, I'm sitting there thinking, okay, and I've said this for a while, like the biggest concern I have about the hobby right now is everything's priced to perfection. And it's just, every player is not going to be perfect. Most players aren't going to be perfect. When you're buying the best, you're protected, but there's going to be this massive gap formed between the really good stuff that holds its value and how everything else just kind of bottoms out. And there's this gap in there that we're just going to see, and it's going to be tough to swallow for a lot of people if you're not ready for it. Do you think it's a fair statement?
I think it's, I think, it's similar to, 1998, 1999 in the stock market, or, more recently in the stock market. If you're investing in tech stocks in the late 90s or within the last 3 or 4 years, if you lost money, you got problems. like you could not have lost money in buying tech stocks in those periods of time. Yeah. And my fear is that, there's a lot of money that has come into the sports card market, which has pushed the market higher, higher, higher. And I've seen statistics that have shown this. And you couldn't go wrong, from starting mid-March through May, June, July. Like the amount of money that was flowing in was because people were getting returns. Yes. But a lot of those people that came in weren't in here, before that. And so they don't know what it's like to go through a down market. And because it's a market, all markets work in cycles. And so, there's someone a lot smarter than us that created a physics equation, of all actions have an equal and opposite reaction. That's like physics 101. And so if something's going to go up, 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 there's enough downforce on that. At some point, it's going to come down, 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 down. And, we as kids all grew up playing a game of musical chairs, and everyone loves dancing around those chairs. But you don't want to be the last one standing when that music stops. And similar to investing, you don't want to be holding the asset when that market starts to come down. However, you don't want to hold that asset when the market comes down if you're a short-term investor. So if you're purely doing this for speculation because you think, you need to make a couple of bucks before your next paycheck, or you're trying to make a couple of dollars, to go do whatever you're going to go do, that's where you're going to be most impacted, because the market's going to go down at some point. If you're in this for a long-term horizon, and I'm talking at least 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years, and we can talk about length, you shouldn't have to worry about a market going down, because all markets will go down and then they'll come back up. The question, though, is how much higher do they go back up? And so, look at, I was talking to someone a lot smarter than me in the sports card space recently about Giannis and his rookie card. And apparently in season, he gets up to about $7,000 in a Prism, and after this, gets to the playoffs, doesn't go far, happened 2 years in a row, and then the card trades down to like $3,500. It's happened twice already. And so, if you learned the first year, then you could have made that trade the second year if you believed in, 1 year of data, and you would have doubled your money. Well, there you go. Boom, you have it right there. You queued up right on time. And so, as long as you're in it long enough, you can make up for that. But you have to have a long-term mindset. And I believe that, the people that are going to get hurt the most in the sports card space right now are the people that are coming in to make a quick dollar to come out. And, I hope it doesn't happen. But, if you study markets of any industry, history repeats itself and markets will go up and down. And so, the trick is, stay in it long enough so that if it does go down, it's going to come back up. Just give it time. And then, get ready to, make your sales or, go buy when you want to. And so, there you go. There's your cycles. And there's also a great chart. I think DailyFX actually has one. But there's another chart that shows cycles by year. And what you basically see is that, the United States financial markets run in 8 to 10 year cycles. And so if you are in finance and you're in the markets and, you're in a cycle, we think about right now, the last time we had a down market was, 2008. And, we finally had one, fairly recently. And so that was, a 12-year part, but that was very long. Previous to 2008 was 2001, so 7 years, or 2000. It's 8 years, and then before that was the early 90s or late 80s, and so it's a cycle. And as long as you believe in the long-term growth or health of the industry, the market will recover. You just have to have that belief that in the long term it's going to come back. And so if you're in it for the short term, it's going to hurt. If you're in it for the long term, as long as you don't get discouraged when the market goes down, that's a buying opportunity. Keep your head on and enjoy the hobby.
Beautiful. By the way, when you put this on I think it was your latest article, you had this bull market chart in there. It definitely opens up your eyes. It puts things in perspective, and you can kind of put different parts of the hobby over the last couple of years in these buckets. It's pretty fascinating.
It is, and the other one to study is the Gartner hype curve, and that comes from tech. And so a lot of technology companies you can put in technology products, you can put right on the Gartner hype curve, and it's almost to a T. History repeats itself. Why should the sports market be any more different? It's not, and so we things may be a tiny bit different, but we will follow other patterns of industry.
Absolutely. For listening folks, I'll put the links in the show notes for everything that Darren's written, and obviously these articles that he's mentioning here. So some good stuff. Interesting. Okay. So I'm curious though, when you think about market cap in the sports card world, what do you think right now is influencing more than anything the market cap? Do you think it's influencers, period? Is it guys like Gary Vee? Is it supply and demand? Is it sports players kind of taking center stage? What do you point to as kind of like, oh my gosh, market cap's all of a sudden exploding?
Well, so when market cap explodes, and so definition of market cap, which I'll define, but you can correct me if it's not the definition that you want to do. But the way I would define market cap is, the total value of the overall space.
Correct.
And so, when market caps are exploding, like we are right now in the sports card world, it's not because of one thing. When a market moves a little bit, it could be because of one factor. So with us right now and the exuberance of what's happening in the sports card space, I think it's a handful of confluences that are laddering up to what we're seeing in the space right now. Some healthy confluences, and some unhealthy ones. And so what I don't want to come across and what I don't want people to think is I'm a naysayer to the market. I'm not. I'm extremely positive. I'm in. I've hopefully convinced you. I'm wearing a New York Knicks shirt. I've been a hardcore fan for a long time. But, what we'll talk about, could come across as negative. And I'm a long-term believer in the sports card space. So I just want to state that. So why I think, we're seeing, charts, and I can send you stuff like, I've got a lot of data. And, we've basically seen the slope of a ski mountain since March. And a lot of things happen in March in the United States and the rest of the world. So there's a handful of things that I believe that are affecting. First, and in no particular order, first is stimulus checks. There are a lot of Americans right now that are getting stimulus checks, and those stimulus checks are putting more money on the table than a lot of Americans have had. Or they're putting money on the table that are adding to the gross income of Americans, and now there's some extra dollars that weren't around before. And when you take that, plus one of the largest industries in America getting shut down for a period of time that many people love, which is the sports industry, when it tried to figure out what it was going to do with COVID, people aren't just going to say, all right, sports are gone out of my life. We like sports too much in America to just say, all right, I can't watch it. I got to do something with it. And, where do we go? Well, sports cards. Why not? And at the same time that televised sports went on a brief hiatus when leagues were trying to figure out what they were going to do, an entire industry that's tied to both televised sports and in-person sports is sports betting.
Yep.
And bettors are bettors. If I can't bet on sports, I'm going to go bet on something else. And if you shut down sports betting for a period of time, that money just doesn't go into your pocket and then go buy library books. That money is going to the pocket to figure out where else can I bet. And because that money was the closest thing to sports betting was sports cards at the time, then the market started to see a whole bunch of money. And because we had a lot of money moving into the market at the exact same time, we saw the price of individual cards start to rise. And it was money, chasing money, chasing money, chasing money. And so, that LeBron E-Tops that I bought for, $90 started to go to 96, and then went to 98, and then went to 105, and then, 500, and then 600, and 1,000, and then 1,200, and 1,700, and probably topped out at 2,200. And so, I think a lot of the exuberance that we've seen started with some of the stimulus money moving into the space, compounded with daily fantasy players or sports bettors coming into space. I'm not saying that's bad. I'm just saying that's what we're seeing, compounded with Last Dance and a focus on, the Chicago Bulls and Michael Jordan being the top sports card to collect before LeBron came around, and this renewed excitement around basketball. And then at the same time, basketball as a sport becoming this, I'm going to get a lot of hater on this, but basketball as a sport becoming the sport for America. Baseball hasn't helped itself over the years, ever since the lockout. I'm a Yankees fan. It hasn't helped itself. Hockey has always been a great sport, but it's always been on the periphery. And football over the last couple of years has taken a lot of negative publicity from the markets because of the violence in the sport. I still like football, don't get it wrong, but it's kind of stepped back in the sense of the premier sport in America. And at the same time, basketball, because of the celebrity athletes, what LeBron has done for the sport, what other folks have done to not screw up the NBA, even though there are a whole bunch of systematic issues, it has sort of taken off. And so the confluence of all of these things happening has sort of pushed the market. And so if you, I challenge anyone listening, go to Google Trends, like Google Trends, then type in, football, basketball, baseball, and hockey, and look at how much basketball has spiked over the last year. And so when we think about sports cards, basketball has gained the most value of all of the sports cards in aggregate. So if you compare sport by sport, basketball has gained the most in value. Now, there's probably more baseball cards in circulation because baseball has historically been, America's pastime. But basketball cards on the whole versus baseball cards have gained more like-for-like appreciation. And so we have basketball coming first. Now, at least the numbers I've seen is we've probably traded off anywhere between 1 to 10% of market price of a card over the last 45 days. And so, there's, if you look on Twitter and, or on Insta or wherever, if you listen to your podcast on, Bench Clear, there's people talking about, the market's cooling a little bit, that actually is healthy. Don't freak out. The market can't be roaring all the time. And so it's cooling a little bit. The question is, why is it cooling? And so, people could say, well, football started and football is a huge betting sport. And so, are people, getting into the start of the football season the same way they got to the start of the basketball season or the start of the playoffs and the bubbles? And so that, that's one area. The second is maybe some of the stimulus money running out at this point for the whoever has the check, maybe they spent it and there's less of that to go spend now. And so some of that money may be exiting the market. And so, that could be a hypothesis. And so, with basketball, basketball ramping down as we get deeper into the playoffs, we're in the finals now. So there's less teams, less players, on television every night. For the speculators who are trading Tyler Hero's, major game or, whoever's major game, you can't do that as much because there's just less players on TV every night at this point. And so that opportunity has now shifted to football. And so, we see, football, but football's naturally a different sport because it's on a lot less. And, there's more value of football player dollar concentration in quarterbacks than position players because of, quarterbacks get less injured. And so, it's a little bit different. And so dollars are sort of shifting that way. And so, I think healthy that markets cool down a bit. They'll come down. And then before we know it, we're going to be upon the start of the next basketball season, assuming all things are okay. The rumors are speculating, or maybe it's fact, I don't know, but December, January. And so, come October, November, the speculation for all the players for the next season, and then we're gonna be back. And so, all I got to do is really get through the next 90 days. And, don't look at the market value of your collection. But what you should do is probably buy during that time. And then we go into the basketball season again. And so, hopefully, the start of this basketball season is at a higher floor than the start of the last basketball season. And if that, and what I mean by that is, if you were to take, a rookie coming in 2019-20 season versus 2020-21 season, the floor for that rookie, hopefully, it's going to be tougher because it's a tougher rookie class this year, should be a little higher. Or the same card from 2019-20 season, should be trading a percentage higher in the next season. And so if that happens, that means the market overall is increasing over time. And that we think is healthy. And, similar to, United States, economy that trades up over time. It doesn't appreciate 50% a year, trades nominally, but that nominal is health. And that's what we should see within the sports card space.
Interesting. There's one thing we know for sure. Panini and Topps are going to find a way to charge more than they did last year. So we're going to see that.
So are the grading companies now, I guess.
Right. Oh, dear. No, I think it's interesting because you hit on a point where we can't underestimate the fact that we are now in this world of sports cards where we actually do have a marketplace.
Yeah.
We didn't have it before, and it's hard to compare anything 3 years ago with what we got now. What's that? Yeah.
Your marketplace comment, like what's different today versus 35 years ago when I was walking around that county center? The marketplace today is global. That's an important fact. Because the market is global, that means there are more buyers for any one individual card.
Right. If
the marketplace wasn't global, the Yao Ming card rookie probably wouldn't be that hot. Because the marketplace is global, go look at a 1992 Yao Ming rookie card. Try and buy that.
Right.
Like that is hot. But that's amazing and incredible and amazing in so many ways. And so, we're in unprecedented times where there's more eyeballs and demand for, the cards and collectibles. And it's truly a global sport. And as, our sports leagues penetrate other countries, the more love that we can create for the game, the more demand will be from other countries for these cards and players.
Absolutely. No, I love it. I love seeing the maturity play out before our eyes, right? We're dealing with cards that have been around for 80 years in some of these cases. And it's like, they're just all of a sudden entering the 21st century and trying to figure out their place in the world. Yeah. I get it. It's divisive and people don't want to let go of traditional ideas, but it's a beautiful thing, man.
Absolutely.
We get to intersect, like we said, the intro, we get to intersect things that we love, multiple facets, and do it in a lot of ways. It's pretty cool. All right. So I've already noted this. I'm going to have you on like 2 or 3 times every quarter because we're going to have to talk about different things happening in the hobby because you got an incredible perspective. But let's wrap this up. And I like to do it with a little bit of rapid fire. I'm going to give you 6 words. You're just going to respond back with the first word that comes to you. You cool with that?
Let's do it.
All right. CNBC.
CNBC. Like the watch what you watch.
Okay. Pomp. Anthony Pompliano. Do you know the name?
No.
Okay.
He's
got a great podcast. It reminds me a lot of the interviews.
Yeah. Smart. Genius.
Smart. There you go. Mario Lemieux.
One of the greatest ever.
The Lion King.
Broadway.
Oh, nice. I like the parallel. Okay. RJ Barrett.
The future.
Oh, blind optimism. Coldplay.
Incredible business people.
Love it. Good stuff, man. Good stuff.
I am a big cult. I mean, Adventure of a Lifetime is probably, I think their greatest song. Absolutely love that from Coldplay. And RJ Barrett, as a Knicks fan, I'm biased, and I've been to plenty of Knicks games, even though I do live in Boston. Every business trip I can take to New York, I try and catch a game. But I like him. I think he was overshadowed at Duke, and he's got some game. I like his counterpart as long as they don't trade him, Mitchell Robinson.
Yeah.
The Knicks can screw up anything, and they will screw up everything. And so I'm sure one of those two will be gone sometime soon. I hope not. But I like the new coaching staff coming in to put some structure around the team. I'm excited for another Knicks season. I'll root for them. But they've given me a lot of black eyes over the years. They don't make it easy.
Are you a buyer of RJ Barrett right now?
I'm a buyer of Mitchell and RJ. Everyone's got to stick by their home team every once in a while. And
for sure.
I like him. I liked him at Duke. I think he's a special kid, and I think they can do well. Mitchell Robinson just needs to stay out of foul trouble, and if he can do that, they'll be okay. I had a question for you.
Yeah, man.
So, a question, and I know you want to wrap it up, so feel free to
You're good.
whatever. Which is PSA there's speculation that PSA has roughly 1 to 2 million cards in backlog. Beckett, has, their 30 to 45 day turnaround time is now 6 month turnaround time. SGC is SGC. And so what happens to the market when 1 million or 2 million graded cards hit the market at some point? I'm curious on, you're a collector, you're in the space, you talk to a ton of people, what's your hypothesis on when that happens? That worries me. That worries me quite a bit. Not to leave the space, but I worry, it'll depress. But I'm curious on your perspective on it.
Yeah, I think it's a great point. I think it's going to be funny to watch how this shift takes place from this infatuation with graded base cards, silver. I'll give it silvers or parallels, but base silver, flagship tops, and all of a sudden people realize, oh crap, this is like water. I can go get this stuff anywhere. Why didn't I buy and grade serial card, serial numbered cards and short printed cards? And there's going to be this heavy like gravitation towards actual SP cards. And I just, I like you said, I've done a lot of the grading of base, and I am scared to death when this backlog, and it's going to catch up soon because they're hiring like crazy right now to catch up. It's going to be pretty nasty.
I do worry about that.
Yeah. But at the same time, to our marketplace comment, that's the beautiful thing about it. Like having a tradable, like very liquid asset, I think makes it really fun, right? To know that there are 10,000 cards out there that are moving and shaking like that.
Absolutely. Yeah. At the end of the day, we're all having a good time.
Yes, we are. And that was a great conversation, Darren. Thanks for joining me. I appreciate it.
Ty, appreciate you reaching out, man.
All right. Have a good night.